Good afternoon. It's my honor and pleasure to join this important discussion, and a big thank you to Wayne and all the other presenters. As we confront the climate emergency, the fact remains that those who have contributed least to the crisis are often the hardest hit, and this includes Indigenous peoples. A recent study showed that forests managed by Indigenous peoples in the Amazon were strong net carbon sinks, effectively removing 340 million tons of CO2 from the atmosphere every year in the 20 years to 2021. In contrast, lands not managed by Indigenous peoples were a net carbon source, producing and emitting 270 million metric tons of CO2 in the same period. Indigenous peoples have contributed very little to the causes of climate change, but their lands and their culture are paying a heavy price. IFAD's mission is to invest in rural people to overcome poverty, achieve food security, and build resilient livelihoods. We do this in partnership with rural people and their organizations. IFAD works in all settings where Indigenous peoples live: the mountains and the hills, the valleys and the plains, the islands and the shoreline. For almost 50 years, IFAD has been working closely with Indigenous peoples who themselves lead and are at the center of the projects. Currently, IFAD projects are set to reach 5.6 million Indigenous peoples in over 44 countries globally. We know that Indigenous peoples are recognized as the stewards of nature and biodiversity. The knowledge of Indigenous peoples can guide us in transforming food systems and responding to climate change. I'd like to give you a case study of an example in Guatemala with IFAD and Indigenous peoples. The vast majority of the Indigenous peoples, almost 60% of the population, live in poverty and are chronically malnourished. In Guatemala, IFAD supports the Mujeres Cuatro Pinos project, which was the first women's cooperative to be so successful that it ended up exporting goods to international markets. Today, it employs around 450 women and can produce nearly 150,000 kilograms of vegetables a month. That's an impressive figure. These women run their own training and knowledge management center so that they can promote the regional exchange of information and best practices. Today, the women running this project not only produce enough food to feed their families and their communities in a healthy way, but they also export internationally. This exemplifies how targeted investment and support on Indigenous communities fosters sustainable development and enhances food security. Another important initiative that I'd like to mention is IFAD's work with the Asian Development Bank and others on the Model Forest Act. We recognize that laws are too often outdated and they lack sufficient protection for Indigenous peoples and the land that they shepherd. These laws need to be updated to address threats from deforestation, biodiversity loss, and climate change. IFAD, together with the Asian Development Bank and other partners, is supporting the Model Forest Act initiative. This is a legal blueprint to help legislators, policymakers, and others better manage and use our native forests around the world, preserving the rights of Indigenous communities and other forest-dependent populations. Today, together, we need to protect the forests for future generations. Ladies and gentlemen, we must continue to invest in Indigenous peoples while bolstering natural resource management legal protections. Together, we can champion climate justice and work towards a sustainable, inclusive world where no one is left behind. Thank you.